Tonight at 10, carmaker Nissan announces 2 new models will be built in Britain. Ministers deny there's been a special deal. The decision safeguards 7,000 jobs in Sunderland, ending concerns that Nissan could pull out of the UK because of Brexit.
This is fantastic news for the British economy from Nissan. This is a very important commitment of investment here in the UK.
Nissan said that support and assurances offered by the government had been crucial. Labour is demanding to know the detail.
We need to know what deal was done with Nissan, what support and promises it was offered. But there'll be many other manufacturers now saying, what about us?
And this on the day that new figures suggest the UK economy grew more quickly than expected in the 3 months after the referendum. Also tonight. In Iraq, Kurdish forces move closer still to the city of Mosul. We report from the front line.
We're hearing quite a bit of outgoing fire. The troops are trying to gauge how much resistance is in these villages.
In Calais, the migrant camp has now been cleared, but aid workers say dozens of young migrants have nowhere to go.
Our amazing First Lady, Michelle Obama!
No doubt about the star of the show, Michelle Obama, back on the Clinton campaign trail. And we meet the man who transformed the way that television treated art as he heads for his 90th birthday.
Here, plans for a major expansion of the Port of Southampton. And Southern Health's failing of this woman is a wake-up call, says a coroner. But do other families believe the Trust's listening to them?
Good evening. The Japanese car company Nissan has confirmed that it's to build 2 new models at its factory in Sunderland. There had been concerns that Nissan might abandon the UK following the vote to leave the European Union, but today's decision safeguards 7,000 jobs. Nissan said that support and assurances offered by the government had been crucial, and Labour is now calling for any deals to be made public. Our business editor Simon Jack is in Sunderland with the latest tonight.
You know, Hugh, it's not often that a car factory that produces 2,000 cars a day shuts down production, but they did today at 11 o'clock this morning for this announcement, which was greeted with cheers. And no wonder, just a month ago, there was talk of deferral amid Brexit uncertainty. Then 2 weeks ago, the boss of Nissan pops into number 10 Downing Street, has a much more positive tone, and here we are today. The question is, what did the government offer Nissan, and what does that mean for the government's wider industrial strategy? One thing's for sure, whatever they said, it worked. It was the news that Sunderland had been hoping for, a commitment to make cars many years into a post-Brexit future, and it was unsurprisingly welcomed by workers.
I'm over the moon. Obviously it brings security. I've been here 25 years and I hope it's going to be here for another 30 years.
Oh, because if Nissan went down, that would be it. North East would be gone. But like I say, Nissan took over from the shipyards and the pits, didn't it? And if Nissan was to go, it'd be back to the bad old days again.
55% of cars built here in Sunderland are for export to the EU. Those exports support 7,000 jobs here in the plant, and in total the car industry employs 169,000 people, with an estimated 5 times that number in the UK supply chain. This decision helps to paint a more reassuring picture of a post-Brexit economy.
This is fantastic news for the British economy from Nissan. This is a very important commitment of investment here in the UK. I think it shows the strength of our economy. We've been showing Nissan and others that we are committed to getting the best possible deal from the future relationship that we will be negotiating with the European Union, and we wish to ensure and assure the competitiveness of the British economy.
Just a month ago at the Paris Motor Show, the boss of Nissan was publicly expressing concerns about the uncertainty that Brexit would create for its UK operations.
Well, it would mean obviously that Sunderland will lose competitiveness when it comes to choosing a place where we will be sourcing the products for Europe, because all of a sudden you're taking 10% higher cost for tax reasons. That's what it means.
The big question is, what on earth has the government offered Nissan to allay their fears? Is it compensation against possible future tariffs? Is it some kind of grant, maybe a cut in business rates? Nissan aren't denying that inducements have been discussed, but they are denying there's some sort of sweetheart deal. So whatever public money Nissan end up getting, the rest of the industry will want as well.
So we have confidence in the government, and that the government will put in enough measures and means to support the whole of the automotive industry, so that at the end of it we all remain competitive. No special deal for Nissan, it's a government working with the whole industry.
It seems the government is smiling on the car industry, but what about the rest of the economy?
We hear a deal for Nissan, which I welcome if it protects jobs, but we can't be in a situation where chaotically we get from government leaks largely or some individual statements that they're dealing with individual sectors of the economy and not the whole economy's future.
The city of Sunderland, full of cars, set for European markets, with a fair wind it seems from government. The course for other sectors of the economy is not yet charted. Simon Jack, BBC News, Sunderland.
Well, Nissan's announcement came on the day that figures suggested the UK economy grew faster than expected in the 3 months following the EU referendum. Strong consumer spending was one of the main factors. The rate of 0.5% was slightly lower than in the previous quarter, but better than the Bank of England had forecast, as our economics correspondent Andy Verity tells us.
This Sheffield manufacturer of wire connectors and other goods is everything the economy wasn't supposed to be following a vote to leave. Confident, growing healthily and exporting patented manufactured goods based on innovation and long-term investment. If anything, the weakness of the pound post-referendum has given it a lift.
We will make gains. We are 85% export, 40% of sales in euros, 30% in US dollars. So clearly the value of those sales will go up in UK sterling.
As the Chancellor visited a key export hub, Southampton's docks, the picture emerging from the post-referendum fog is of an economy growing faster than most expectations, including his.
Very strong third quarter growth. That tells us that we go into the period of negotiation for our exit from the EU from a position of strength, with the economy doing very well.
You warned in the spring that a vote to leave the European Union would leave us as a country weaker and worse off, that it would have a chilling effect. Were you wrong?
The economy has proved to be very resilient. We went into the referendum, I think the figures now show, stronger than we thought at the time, and the economy has held up very well since. But we are going to have a period of uncertainty ahead.
On the official estimate, the value of all goods and services in the economy, gross domestic product, grew entirely because of the services sector, up by 0.8%. Elsewhere, activity was down, with the construction sector shrinking by 1.4% and manufacturing overall down by 1%. The economy may be slowing down, but overall the economic effects of the Brexit vote have been nothing like what the Treasury predicted. In fact, to exporters like this one, the weakness of the pound has given them a big lift. But that benefit is accompanied by a lingering anxiety. If we're not members of the single market, that short-term gain could morph into long-term economic pain. Across Sheffield, this company's had to pay much more for the circular saw blades and other tools it imports from China. If it hadn't announced higher prices, its profits would have been wiped out.
We would probably stay in bed because it wouldn't be worthwhile getting out of bed to come to work at that stage. We would not be making sufficient money to pay for the heating, the lighting, the wages and everything else. So it was inevitable that we were going to have to put the prices up.
In cutting interest rates to record lows, the Bank of England sought to protect towns like Sheffield from the chill of an economic winter. So far at least, the climate's proved unexpectedly mild. Andy Verity, BBC News, Sheffield.
Let's go live to Westminster, and Laura Kuenssberg is there, our political editor. Laura, when Nissan talk about getting support and assurances, do we know what they mean by that?
Well, not precisely, Hugh, and ministers say there was no haggling, they say there was no chequebook involved. But clearly, even if there wasn't a formal deal, they have come to an understanding, shall we say. Ministers don't fly to Japan with nothing to say. The boss of Nissan didn't pop into number 10 just to have a cup of tea. And I think the best way to describe it is there were two main things that were put on the table, if you like. The first was a promise that ministers basically communicated to Nissan that we've voted to leave the European Union, but they haven't taken leave of their senses. They presented themselves and promised that they will be serious politicians who calmly, rationally and not recklessly take us out of the European Union. And they will be doing so over a period of time with the economy and business at the forefront of their mind. But the second part of the discussions, as I understand it, were basically assurances about what happens if things get very, very sticky. And while there wasn't a deal, there weren't detailed proposals, there is an understanding that if things go south, then ministers don't deny they discuss the idea of compensation or possibly grants. Neither of those things completely unprecedented in times when the economy has a really hard time. But I think the broader thing here is the background that ministers are worried about what might happen to the economy with the uncertainty of our relationship with the EU as we prepare to leave. And therefore what we've seen in the last couple of weeks on Nissan is that ministers are really prepared to sweat it, to really push, to try to make sure that big businesses, big employers do stay here in the UK. And of course, for other industries, whether the banks or the aerospace industries, they may well look at what's happened today. They may well look at the understanding that's been reached between Nissan and the government and think, well, I quite fancy a bit of that. And a precedent, I think, has been set.
Laura, thank you very much. Laura Kuenssberg with her thoughts there on today's events at Westminster. Now, in Iraq, special forces say that they've moved more than 1,000 civilians from frontline areas around the city of Mosul, the last stronghold of so-called Islamic State in the country. As troops and Kurdish fighters continue their drive towards the city, the militants are fighting back. They're sometimes using suicide bombers. Our correspondent Ola Gerin and cameraman Nico Hamion are with Kurdish fighters, and they're among the first journalists to get into the village of Fazliya as it was being liberated from IS, and they've just sent us this special report.
A harbinger of terror. We entered hostile territory, taking the battle to IS with Kurdish Peshmerga fighters. This was their second attempt to free the village of Fazliya. Last week they faced heavy resistance. Along the way, tension building as we start to come under fire and to respond.
Well, we're moving forward now very slowly and carefully. We're hearing quite a bit of outgoing fire. The troops are trying to gauge how much resistance is in these villages.
This was the answer. A massive roadside bomb just ahead. It was one of 4 on our route. Then the Peshmerga moved to confront a suspected suicide bomber. They have to check him for explosives with their bare hands. This time they were lucky, just a civilian. We arrive in what looks like a deserted village. Locals start to emerge, tentatively, to offer thanks. But soon, this. Warning shots from wary troops. At last, freedom and relief. There's nothing to worry about, he says. It's all over. But there's a legacy of torment. They destroyed us, says Mohammed. They completely destroyed us. There was a sense of a community coming back to life, of old friends reuniting, freed from the tyranny of IS. A moment of victory for the Peshmerga. And for some here, of rebirth. I can't find words to express how happy I am, says Khaled. It feels like I have been born again. Nearby, locals attacked an IS sign that had loomed over them, instructing women to cover themselves from head to toe. Amar was happy to be wearing her best and not wearing a hijab. As this woman thanks the Peshmerga, IS make their presence felt not far away. Helping to secure the village, Alan Duncan, a volunteer sniper from Scotland. He's fought with the Peshmerga since 2014 and has been part of the recent push against IS or Daesh.
It's kind of funny because places they're weak, places they'll stand and fight, they're very up and down, you know. But you're talking a lot of these people cheering now were probably Daesh. They're just going back in their community, so they haven't gone away.
Even as they celebrate, the troops know their enemy could soon re-emerge.
Well, the Peshmerga are now moving through the village. They're securing the area street by street, and more civilians are appearing. They can speak freely for the first time in over 2 years, but there is still some tension here. The fighters are concerned that among those coming out onto the streets, there could be suicide bombers.
But there were no threats concealed among the villagers. They were savouring the chance to reclaim old pleasures banned by the jihadis. The black flag of IS has been pulled down from the mosque, the Peshmerga vowing that never again will it be allowed to fly here. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Fazliya, Northern Iraq.
In Calais, aid workers have expressed concern for dozens of children and young people who were forced to sleep on the roadside last night after the French authorities closed the migrant camp. Since Monday, some 5,500 people have been moved from the camp to reception centres across France. The Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, spoke to the French Interior Minister today and stressed the need for children who remain in Calais to be protected. Our correspondent, Damien Grammatica, sent this report.
It's the slow strangling of life in the jungle. French police moved in today, then this afternoon sealed off the entry, reasserting control here. So it seems the police's patience is starting to run out, and with each of these moves that they're making up here, they're just taking a bit more territory, pushing the remaining refugees that little bit further away from the jungle.
If you go on the bus to the registration centre...
So for those left outside, a choice.
If you are not 17 or younger, then you need to take the adult bus.
For the adults, a new destination, refugee processing centres around France. But for some children, uncertainty.
And somebody killed in front of me.
We found Thais, 16 years old, from Sudan. The papers proving his age are still in the jungle.
Yeah, I cannot enter inside. Yeah, the French people reject me to come inside.
The police?
The police, yeah.
So where did you stay last night?
I sleep in street.
Just out here somewhere?
Yeah.
The children are meant to be going here, into care. Some will end up in the UK. Last night, a few were left in the open. And activists filmed this today, children being detained by police. It's not clear why. The destruction of the jungle is gathering pace. Homes and hopes demolished. The fear is up to 100 children may still have no place to go.
Oui, mais il y a des associatifs qui sont là.
Gilles de Berve, who's from the police union, told us there are charities working here who could bring the children to the police and they'll get beds. But nearby were more boys, all under 17, wondering if they face another night on the streets. The jungle is gone, but a tangled web of problems endures. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Calais.
Health experts in Northern Ireland have expressed concern that pregnant women are putting their lives at risk by taking abortion pills which they buy online. The strict abortion laws in Northern Ireland mean that a pregnancy can only be legally terminated if the life or health of the mother is in serious danger. According to the United Nations, 6 nations worldwide have a total ban on abortion under any circumstances. A further 38, including Northern Ireland, have very strict controls which allow abortion if the mother's life, as I said, is in danger. In recent months, campaigners in Northern Ireland have intensified their calls for a change in the law. Chris Buckler has this special report.
This was a deliberately provocative stunt by pro-abortion campaigners, using a drone to deliver pills capable of causing a pregnancy to be terminated. and then taking the drugs in full view of the police. But similar pills are arriving in Northern Ireland regularly, despite the strict laws that prevent any abortion unless the mother's life or health is at serious risk.
It's a class issue now where those who can afford it are travelling to England, they're having an abortion there privately, and those who can't afford it are here to either be in a dangerous situation or get these pills online and face criminalisation.
There have been many warnings that people can't be sure what they're ordering from the numerous websites that offer abortion pills online. Purchasing and using the drugs is illegal across the UK and Ireland, but pills we ordered arrived from India with little documentation, and we had them tested at Queen's University in Belfast.
As with all drugs, there are risks associated with this drug's use. Of particular concern with this drug would be the heavy bleeding, and a number of women will actually require a blood transfusion due to the blood loss associated with this product.
If you're talking there about potentially heavy blood loss as a result of using these drugs, is that potentially life-threatening?
Completely, yeah.
But the BBC has learned that recently at least one woman was reported to police and charged with using abortion pills after she sought medical treatment. Groups like Amnesty have been involved in a long campaign to try to get the laws here relaxed, but there's resistance too. Abortion is a particularly sensitive issue in Northern Ireland, and that probably reflects the close links between religion and politics.
We've been looking to the UK and saying we don't want that to happen, and our politicians have been holding against the tide of some people like Amnesty International and other groups who are actively trying to quite forcefully change our law.
We made several requests to speak to Northern Ireland's Justice Minister Claire Sugden. She refused them all, but she was due to give interviews at this charity event.
Is the NSPCC invited you in here today?
When it became clear that we wanted to talk about abortion, however, her press officer had us thrown out. So
simple as that.
Why is she not prepared to answer any questions about abortion?
I'm not answering any more questions about the film. Please.
Northern Ireland's Health Minister also refused to speak to us, a sign of the sensitivities at Stormont. Its power-sharing government continues to consider proposals for allowing abortion in cases of rape or incest, or where the baby won't survive beyond birth. Campaigners claim a majority of people support change, but so far there's no sign of agreement among the politicians. Chris Buckler, BBC News, Belfast.
A free trade agreement between the European Union and Canada is finally set to go ahead after the Belgian region of Wallonia finally agreed to the plans. The agreement, known as CETA, has led to protests, including today outside the European Commission in Brussels, from workers who fear it gives too much power to multinational companies and harms the farming industry. A 19-year-old has appeared in court charged in connection with the discovery of a suspicious device on a London Underground train at North Greenwich last week. Damon Smith, who's from South East London, is accused of possessing an explosive substance with intent to endanger life. His lawyer indicated that his client would be pleading not guilty on the grounds that it was a prank. NASA has released an image that sheds further light on the fate of a European spacecraft which crashed on Mars last week. The magnified image shows the black crater made by the Schiaparelli module after its parachute was released too early, a mile above the surface. Dark smears on either side suggest that a fuel tank exploded on impact, scattering debris. Now, 12 days before Americans visit the polling stations to elect a new president, a Republican nominee, Donald Trump, has been campaigning in the key state of Ohio, while the Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, has been harnessing the campaigning power of First Lady Michelle Obama at a rally in the key state of North Carolina. Our correspondent Nick Bryant is there for us tonight.
Hugh, at a time when many senior Republicans are distancing themselves from Donald Trump, one of Hillary Clinton's great advantages is the support she's receiving on the campaign trail from big-name Democratic backers. Her husband, Bill Clinton, the Vice President, Joe Biden, the President himself, Barack Obama. But an election where millions more female voters will go to the polls than male voters, it's a woman who's become her not-so-secret weapon.
This is the sort of enthusiasm, these are the sort of crowds you don't often witness outside a Hillary Clinton rally. Some had queued for 7 hours. Every girl is president. For But the headline act was not so much the former First Lady as the present one.
I'm here to see Michelle Obama.
I thought you were going to say Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton too, but Michelle too. Michelle's the main one I want to see, but I'm voting for Hillary.
Warm, trustworthy, with the charisma of a rock star, Michelle Obama has personality traits that critics say are lacking in the Democratic presidential nominee. But Hillary Clinton knows it makes political sense to be upstaged.
It doesn't get any better than being here with our most amazing First Lady, Michelle Obama.
They're members of an exclusive sisterhood, the First Ladies Club, and they're determined to prevent Donald Trump from occupying a White House in Washington that between them they've lived in for almost 16 years. Hillary, she says, is the only one qualified to be president.
She has more experience and exposure to the presidency than any candidate in our lifetime. Yes, more than Barack, more than Bill. So she is absolutely ready to be commander-in-chief on day one. And yes, she happens to be a woman.
Getting young women out to vote is an urgent priority for Hillary Clinton, because many haven't been that enthused by the prospect of a first female president. With millennial voters especially, Michelle Obama could make the winning difference.
I feel like Michelle has convinced me because I look up to her as the First Lady, and all the things that she says encourages me to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Her presence in the election is really helpful for millennials because sometimes we could look at the election and think, well, what do we do? And Michelle Obama is there to reassure us that we can make the right decision.
Michelle Obama has long been a reluctant political warrior, but not in this election. She's become the Democrats' most effective campaigner.
Thank you all. God bless.
They talk about the big mo in US elections, that all-important momentum. But perhaps a new phrase should enter the political lexicon, the Michelle effect. Nick Bryant, BBC News, North Carolina.
Now, the author and eminent art critic John Berger will be 90 next week, and he'll be celebrating with the publication of a new book called Landscapes on Art. Berger was a key figure in making one of the most influential television series on art called Ways of Seeing, broadcast initially back in 1972, and it changed perceptions of art and the way that it was discussed. Our arts editor, Will Gompertz, went to Paris to meet him.
The activity of writing has, for me, been a vital one. It helps me to make sense of things and to continue.
I want to question some of the assumptions usually made about the...
John Berger was a young artist who became a writer who persuaded the BBC to let him make a television series on how the advent of mass media had fundamentally changed the way we perceive art.
It isn't so much the paintings themselves, which I want to consider, as the way we now see them.
His programmes turned out to be as iconic as the art he talked about. Today, John Berger lives in Paris with an old friend and a bad back.
We had 4 months to make these programmes, with nobody ever coming to see us. And after 4 months, incredible amount of editing and re-editing, we offered it to them as a fait accompli. And I mean, circumstances of making television which could never occur again, and which were miraculous for us.
The process of seeing paintings or seeing anything else is less spontaneous and natural than we tend to believe. A large part of seeing depends upon habit and convention.
Is there a right way, and therefore a wrong way, at looking at art?
It's quite disturbing to watch the public. People come in, they stand in front of a painting, they take a picture, and they move on.
Reproductions distort. Only a few facsimiles don't. Take this original painting in the National Gallery. Only what you are seeing is still not the original. I'm in front of it. I can see it.
Did you see this?
Oh, and where is it and what's happening?
It's Hillary Clinton giving an address to an audience.
Yes.
And the whole audience have turned their back on her to take a selfie.
I mean, I understand you're showing it because it tells us something about our time and about the way we try to survive in it and make sense of it, which is very thought-provoking.
Yes.
But you'd have to wait a long time for the thoughts to be expressed by me.
That's okay. He's still writing, and we'll wait. Because, as Arundhati Roy, a fellow Booker Prize winner, said, John Berger teaches us how to think, how to feel, and how to stare at things until we see what we thought wasn't there. Will Gompertz, BBC News, Paris.
John Berger heading for his 90th birthday, talking there to Will Gompertz in Paris. Quick reminder, Newsnight's coming up on BBC Two. Here's Kirsty.
It's seen 2 of its top figures quit in as many months. Tonight on Newsnight, new disclosures about problems at the heart of the independent child sexual abuse inquiry. Join me now on BBC Two, 11 o'clock in Scotland.
That's Newsnight with Kirsty here on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.